Alright, we're holding Yore Deah, Hilchos Basar בחלב Siman Tzadi. Siman Tzadi in its entirety deals with dinei kahal. Kahal in English is the udder. That is from where you milk the cow. Or in German, Euter, E-U-T-E-R. Or in Spanish, Ubre, whichever you prefer. Anyway, today in Hebrew actually, they don't use the word kahal. You go to a butcher and you tell him, Ani rotze kahal, he's going to look at you and says, what's that? They say atinim. Atinim is, the atinim of the para, of the cow, is from where you milk him. Anyway, it's a delicacy in some countries, in places where people did not have too much to eat. As you know, they try to maximize the cow. They eat whatever they can, all the parts that are edible. And I was told that in Iraqi Jews used to tell me, that was just a common item that you would order, and it was cheaper. It was actually cheaper, I believe. And in Iran, I think it's just the opposite. It's expensive. Everybody fought for it. There was not so much of it. And it was known. It was something that was known. We don't see it. It's not too common today. And as it is, the halachas of kahal are very, very different than your typical. As we're going to see, we're going to go through a little bit the sugya summary. It's a very, very, I don't want to say difficult sugya, but it's not an easy sugya. There's a lot of shitas, a lot of ways of understanding the various opinions in Gemara, and there's various rishonim concerning those opinions too. So in the end, after we're done with Siman Tzadi, towards perhaps the end, I'm going to maybe share with you, believe me, a table, which Elon likes, a table, right? Yes. Where you can actually see everything laid out. The various scenarios, the various opinions about each scenario. So it lends itself, this Siman lends itself to a table. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Today we need to go a little bit to discuss more as to what exactly the issues are. We're dealing with Basar בחלב, and this is a situation where you have a piece of meat that intrinsically, I guess you could use the word, it has chalav to begin with. That's where the milk is being produced. That's the machine that produces the milk. So it has within its walls, it has milk. The milk may not have come out yet, but it's inside. And the kahal has a different din of basar b'chalav than your ordinary basar b'chalav. The ordinary din of basar b'chalav is that you can't have it, right? You cannot cook it, you cannot eat it together. But we will see kahal is different. And of course, we would not know it unless we would learn it out from a pasuk. As spoken about this in the past, Gemara in Chulin, Perek Shmini discusses the various halachas of lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. From that pasuk itself, many, many drashas are learned. It's incredible how, without the Torah Shebal Peh, without the oral word, we would not know right from left. There's so many details, so many halachas that are in the Torah Shebal Peh, that without it, there's no way that you can understand, you can fully explain what exactly the prohibition is of lo tevashel b'chalev imo. Why imo? Why gdi? So there's a lot of drushes. We make the yukim from every word. So kahal. The Chachamim tell us in the Maseches Chulin Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis that from the words b'chalev imo, in its mother's milk, one of the drashas is velo b'chalev shchuta, which we've already covered before, that chalev imo does not include milk that comes out of the cow after it has been slaughtered. The prohibition of milk is while it can still be a mother, as Rashi points out, b'chalev imo mashma, it's mashma from the word imo, hareuya liyot em. Right? She could be a mother, nurse a calf, chalev imo. Whereas once the animal is dead, it does not qualify for imo. So that's the diuk of chalev imo. While it is alive, while it can be still a mother, no longer when she's dead. Nevertheless, later on in the Gemara, obviously, there's a discussion about that ultimately there is an Isur Med'Rabbanan. And when we talk about Isur D'Rabbanan, what comes to mind is Gzeira. Right? Why did the Rabbanan make something Asur? Because one may come to cook the real Basar b'chalav. So if there is an Isur Derabanan at all, it's because of some sort of Zera. It looks like it. You may come to Chaz v'Shalom, transgress the real Isur. So that's the point over here is that in the end, we don't treat this as something that is completely mutter, that we can do anything we want with it. There are various limitations on how we can prepare this chal for consumption. Whether we're going to cook it, we're going to roast it. We still have to take certain precautions. There are certain limitations because of the derabanan. But it becomes somewhat complicated, as you will see. Kahal is something very, very unique in how to prepare it, how to get the milk out of it, which is, of course, ultimately what we have to do lechatchila. Today, if you were to want to eat kahal, we will see that there is differences of opinion and how to go about it between the mechaber and the ramah. There are dinim of what to do lechatchila. There are dinim of what the status would be b'di'even if you did not do what you were supposed to do. There's a difference between sli, between roasting and cooking it. There's a difference between roasting it or cooking it by itself versus roasting or cooking it with some other meat in the same pot. Pretty much that's where all the chilukim lie. All right, going back to what we were saying, that this milk is different because this milk is within the walls of the udder. There is a Maimor Chazal that tells us if you ever want to taste Basar b'chalav, which is Asar, this is the way to do it, is to have kahal. In other words, if you were to have kahal, somehow there still may be some sort of flavor, but that flavor is mutter. And why is it mutter? So I saw the Yad Yehuda explaining Rashi, that even though Rashi says that, this is, in explaining the drash, that this is where we learn from Bachalev imo velo Bachalev shchuta, he understands Rashi, that according to Rashi, who, by the way, later on, we're going to see, of all the Rishonim, he's the more machmir. He's one of the ones that's the most machmir with Kachal, in how to understand the sugya, where the Chazal was lenient and where they were not lenient. So the Yad Yehuda explains that the Rashi is saying that as long as the milk did not go out, did not leave the udder, it's not even called chalav. Now that's a very important point. It's not even called halal because you might say, well, what's the difference if it's dead or if it's alive? Milk is milk. Yeah, but that's the point over here. In explaining Rashi, he says that the diuk here is that as long as it has not come out of the udder, it's not even called milk. Well, if it's not called milk, then that's why it may be mutter under certain circumstances to have this kachal, because it has not become milk yet. The milk eventually forms, and eventually, you take it out. But so long as it has not come out of the kachal, it is not even considered milk. And this will help us understand another halacha later on what difference it makes if it has been cooked or not, with meat, with other meat, or even by itself. Because cooking process, as you will see, does do something to the liquids within the walls of the udder. It tends to move it out. And that's where the problems can begin. Just like with Melicha, as we will see, B'ezrat Hashem Niddah, there is a difference between blood staying where it is, staying put within the walls of the, versus blood that comes out, or blood that actually moves around within the meat, which has a different status. Here, we're more concerned about the milk coming out. Of course, once the milk comes out, it's different. So here, the big chidush here is that if it has not come out at all, it's not even called milk. Well, good. If it's not called milk, then the reality is I don't really need the drasha of bachalev imo velo bachalev shchuta. If it has not come out, it's not, according to the way we understand it from Rashi, if it did not come out, it's not milk at all. And the drasha of bachalev imo and not bachalev shchuta is talking about only after it has come out. After it has actually moved out.
So the milk exited the udder after the cow was is that what you're
right,
saying?
Whatever was there, yeah.
Whatever was there.
In other words, whatever is in the udder.
So whatever milk remained in the udder has
whatever liquid,
left the udder.
Right.
Has exited.
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, it has come out of wherever it was before. In other words, before it was within the walls of this udder, of this organ. And now it's no longer within its original place where it was forming.
And the time point for now is after it's dead.
After it's dead, right? Yeah.
So that's called Chalav Shuta.
Yeah, that's called Chalav Shuta.
So again, so in addition, and it being called Chalav Shuta is that it's liver already.
Right. That's the way he understands it, in Rashi. And that's where you have the Gzera de Rabbanon. In other words, he says you would not even have a Gzera de Rabbanon if you would never have left. Very important deal, because this may help us understand the various shita in the Rishonim, the various opinions as to when it's mutter, why is it mutter, or how to prepare it, how to properly cut it up and prepare it, depending on what you're going to do with this. Now, the halachas of chal, if you really, really wanted to learn it in depth, there's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of shitas. There's several sugyas that cover this din of chal, of how to deal with it in the various scenarios. We're not going to do that. It's because I don't think it's, even though it's a siman in Basar b'chalav, it's not as relevant. In other words, we'll cover it. We'll cover the basics of the various opinions, the various rishonim. We'll see actually it all laid out on the table, but we don't have to get into all the details of all the Ikad Amris in the Gemara. You have Ikad Amris as to what pshat is and how to learn pshat. And even though we follow one, I don't know if it's necessary to go into the whole sugya. Unless we would be learning the sugya in the Gemara, then of course we would go line by line. But I'm just letting you know that there's quite a bit in the Gemara, which is what lends to a little bit of lack of clarity, or I don't want to use the word confusion, and that is where all the shitas spring out, because how do you understand it? And Rabbi Elyahu has another shita, and the Tur has, there's various shitas. So we'll go over briefly what they all have to say. Even though we said that from the pasuk of Lo tevashel b'chalev imo, we learned that does not include b'chalev shchuta. Nevertheless, we see later on in the Mishnah, in Kuftes, that this chal, in order to properly prepare it, requires kriya. It requires a form of opening up, tearing it, ripping it, cutting it, however you want to call it, in order to remove lechatchila, whatever may still be there. So in other words, halacha lemaaseh, the Mishnah basically tells us that nonetheless, this is the way to prepare it. In preparing chal, you have to remove whatever milk is there. However, if you did not do this kriya, and you cooked it, right, you prepared it, no problem. You're not over. You don't get malchus for it, right? Rashi says, what's pshat lo over and over? You're not over on the achila of it, if it was cooked without the proper cutting up, and you're not over on the bishul either. Okay. And how do you prepare it? So even the preparation itself is not very, very clear as to which one do you have to do. Do you have to do all of it? Do you have to do part of it, depending on how you want to eat it, if it's roasted or if it's cooked. But basically, the best way to prepare kachal, in other words, the best way to go about removing the milk, is kriya sheti va'erev v'ticha b'kotel, as it's called. You cut it vertically and horizontally, and you splatter it, or you squeeze it against the wall. That's the literal translation. And you can bang it in some other way too. So after you've made the cuts, and by the way, the more cuts, the better. Cutting, I saw somebody explain that the cutting of the kachal, the more cutting is actually better than actually trying to squeeze it or bang out the milk. So what's involved here, that's the way it's understood from the Gemara, that something is required to take it out before you cook it or roast it, and that something involves cutting it up in various ways, in various directions, and squeezing out as best as possible, as much as possible, whatever may still be there. And once you've done that, you're okay, you're safe. However, later on in the Gemara, they still are done, that when we say that if you did not do it, you're not over, does that mean that this kachal is asur, or can you still have it? In other words, it is not clear yet, even though we said you're not over if you went ahead and did it, because it's not real chabas or b'chalav, right? The question is, as it's brought down in the Gemara, Amar Rav Zir, Amar Rav, en over alav umutar, and some say ikad amri that it's asur. And as I was saying before, the Chachamim gave us the kachal as a sample food that exists out there where you can actually taste basar b'chalav. In other words, there are things that are asar, but here's an example of something that is mutter and it somewhat resembles, if you want to have an idea of what it would taste like. Basar b'chalav, this is what you may be able to detect something of the chalav. Even though you've prepared it right, you still may be able to detect a different kind of flavor in this than ordinary. Even Goyim have told me, by the way, that their hot dogs taste different than the kosher hot dogs.
Of course, because of blood.
Because of the blood. It makes a difference in the flavor. Besides the fact that our meat is, they say, saltier because of the Melicha. Even though you've rinsed out the salt after you've done the Melicha, apparently our meat contains a little bit of salt. It's a little salty. Even though you've rinsed it, they say it's a little salty. I don't know if it's that much salt for those people who cannot have any sodium, but maybe a little saltier than non-kosher meat. Could be. I wouldn't know the difference.
Could also be a side effect of the blood. If I remember correctly, I've heard it said that it's blood.
I don't remember.
Sweetness too.
It has some salty.
Salty.
Yeah. Yeah. Later on in the Gemara, they also discuss what would be the difference between, in the case of b'diavad, between cooking this kachal, not doing it right, not cutting it up, not doing your best to remove any milk there, and a keva. Keva is the stomach where the milk, where we spoke about rennet, removing some of the milk that was there. Keva, if the keva was cooked with whatever milk may still be in there, the calf is the calf, that would be also for sure. Where lies here the difference between milk in the keva, the stomach, right, that may contain some milk, leftover from eating, from nursing, versus the kachal that has milk? And the difference is very simple, they explain. That the kachal, the chalav is konus, b'me'av. It's konus, meaning that it's within the walls. It's internal. It's part of the walls. Whereas in the keva, it's not konus. I mean, it's sitting there. It's like a cup, like a plate. It's not part of the stomach, not part of the walls. So that is the big difference between keva, where keva would be asur, and kachal b'di'evet may not be asur. Okay, there's various machlokes, as we said before, on how to understand the Gemara. Lemaskana, in other words, in conclusion, what is the Gemara saying? How do we go about it? Can we cook it with others? If you prepared it, what happens if you didn't prepare it? So the halachas here that are discussed in Siman Tzadik have to do with basically the various scenarios that present themselves as a result of the various machlokesim. So I'm going to give you two main machlokesim, and after that we'll go into the various scenarios. The main machlokesim amongst the Rishonim involve the sugya, the following halachas. Number one, you have kachal that was not cut up. In other words, what do we do in a situation where the kachal was not cut up and it was cooked without any meat? So here we understood so far that kachal, even though it's all midrabanan, we have a drasha from the pasuk. Nonetheless, you still have to prepare it, as the Mishnah says. You still have to cut it up. So now we want to know what's the din if you did not cut it up and you cooked it by itself. Rashi says it's asur. Wow, Rashi says it's asur. We saw various points in the Gemara that tells us basically that it's okay. This is not asur d'oraisa. Why would this be asur? So the explanation of why Rashi says kachal that was cooked by itself without the proper preparation is, the reason it's asur is because it's talking about bishul. In other words, the whole heter of how you can get away with it and not have a problem is bitzli. So when the Gemara discusses the heter, you can have it, go ahead, even if you didn't do right, that according to, that's the way Rashi would learn, all the heter is relates to the din of tzli. When it comes to bishul, no. Why? That's where we understand what we said before. That's what we see, the very important point. Because what does bishul do? Bishul accomplishes something very important. it takes out the chalav. It has the chalav come out into the water or into the tavshil, and then it goes back, and it's reabsorbed into the kachal. So of course this is also midrabana. We're not. Everybody agrees we don't have a problem here with the rice, okay? So the question here is, why is it also midrabana in this scenario of bishul by itself right now? Is because of pirish. Once the milk comes out, once it's reabsorbed into kachal, that chalav will be asur, or that kachal will be asur. And this is the way the Ramah is going to paskin, as we will see inside. The Ramah is going to paskin like Rashi, that if somebody went ahead and cooked the kachal without properly preparing it, even though it's by itself, it's asur. Okay, simple. Shitas Rabbeinu Tam, Tosfos goes through the whole sugya, but Rabbeinu Tam is pretty much of the opinion like the Rambam. I mean, they both pretty much hold the same thing. That kachal shenid bashel, a kachal that has been cooked without any meat, is not nesa, even though you didn't cut it up. Whether you need it or not is a separate question, as we will see later on. Sometimes all that is necessary is a little bit of a cut, and that would be sufficient. Some learn that no, you need the full thing. Cut it vertically, horizontally, ticha bekoisal. So that in itself is going to be a little bit of a question of, do you really need to do the whole thing, or is it just this enough? Or when do you need to cut it up? There's no doubt it's better to cut it up. But here the question is, what happens if you did not? So Rabbeinu Tam in the Rambam says, you know what? If the scenario is that this kachal is all by itself and you didn't do anything, no problem. It's not nesa. And that's the psak of the mechaber. Mechaber follows the Rambam here. Now, I'm just warning you. Even the mechaber will have a halacha in Sif Aleph, which we're going to cover most of it today, which is a din, which is meikar a din, and then in Seif Beis, he's going to tell us something called nohagu, which is a minhag. So now he's telling us the halacha, and which is not very common. He tells us nohagu, what has become the minhag in his time, or even a little bit before time, of how to prepare kachal or how not to prepare it. So anyway, but the Mechaber does pass the meikar din like the Rambam, that it's not a problem. You should have done it properly. You should have cut it up, as the Mishnah says. But if you didn't, it's okay. It's not. There's no isur. Now, there will be, of course, a difference in the lechatchila and also b'di'evet in roasting it versus cooking. As we said, if you see it on the table, you'll be able to see better what the difference is. But there is somewhat of a difference between the two. Just to understand how roasting is better. In roasting, what happens? Roasting, there's fire. Direct fire being applied. So any milk that is coming out is being burnt up. As it's coming out, it's being burnt up. There's nothing really remaining. And by the way, that's the way to do liver too. Is to roast it.
Check the blood.
With respect to the blood, right? And by the way, the same thing is true. Similarly, with lave, you want to have a heart. We don't eat hearts today, but eating a heart also has a similar preparation process as the kachal does, to remove any blood that may be inside. It's not real blood like the blood that is usher elsewhere. Nevertheless, it has to be removed in a similar way by cutting it out. Okay, well, we're not dealing with the heart right now. Point over here is that tzli definitely is one of the better ways to prepare kachal. Roasting it, less issues. Whereas with bishul, you have the problem that if you didn't do right, the milk does go out and come back in. Now, Rabbeinu Tam, in being lenient, explains himself. Even though he understands too that the milk came out. I mean, it's a fact. With cooking, the milk came out. Why are we going to be lenient with kachal? As we're going to see later on, that there are various interesting leniencies with kachal, including the following one. Remember the Hilchos of Bittul in Taaruvot, Ishim sometimes? But what happens to that piece of Isser that was there? There's various halachos legabe the piece of Isser in the tavshil. One of them is that you do not include it in the 60. You need 60 against it. Then there's also the din of Hanan. There's the din of that. What happens to that piece fell into a second pot a second time around. We're pretty much machmer, especially those who hold Hanan b'shar Yisurim. We will see later on in Kachal there are various leniencies that even though we're saying that this is an Isur D'Rabbanan, it will not be an ordinarily Isur D'Rabbanan here. In one way is that when you are trying to be mevatel the Kachal, if there's ever a problem, the Kachal will be one of the 60. So in reality, all you need is 59. So that's something that we'll talk about later on, why. But as we will see, there are various leniencies with Kachal that you don't find with Shar Isuri D'Rabbanan. With some Isuri D'Rabbanan, we saw actually Chumras, that it's not even Batal Be'elev. Here, you actually find the Kula, various leniencies that you don't find elsewhere. So anyway, so going back to Rabbeinu Tam. So Rabbeinu Tam explains himself. You know why we're not so machmir here? When it was cooked by itself. Because the tam of the kechal did not change. It had that tam before. It had whatever tam it had in the kechal before. Now that you've cooked it and the cholov came out and came back in, it did not affect the tam. So this is a big machlokes. So Rashi basically says that even b'di'evet it's asur. Rabbeinu Tam is going to say that even lechatchila it's okay, no problem here. You're cooking it and it's moving around. Yeah, we're not going to be machmir in such a. Even though the Mishnah of course says you should cut it up, it's not me'akev so much. Why? Because the tam did not change. The tam was always the same. Since the tam is always the same, it has not changed. Even though this cholov is coming out and coming back in, we're not concerned with that. It retains the same flavor. Okay, so this is the first halacha. This is the first area where we have a major machlokes rishonim, Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, and those, of course, that follow either Rashi or follow the Rabbeinu Tam. And we'll see that in the table, who follows who. The second halacha, or the second area where there's a machlokes, is if this kachal was properly cut up, as the Mishnah suggests, as the Mishnah advises one should do, and it was cooked with other meat. Can it be cooked with other meat? Should, what happens if it was? That's the second area of contention. According to Rashi, it's not clear, and that is why we have a machlokes rishonim on what Rashi would say to that. Because remember, when it comes to bishul, if it's not done properly, it's also according to Rashi. So the machlokes rishonim, the Sefer HaTruma and the Tur say that it's also lechatchila to actually cook it with other meat. In other words, according to Rashi, this is the way to learn Pshat Rashi, it would be asur to cook it with other meat. But b'di'evet, if you did so, lo nesar akhal, it's not asur. That's we're talking about if it was cut up properly. Then if you did it b'di'evet, it's okay. The other shita, the Ravya and the Or Zarua, hold that even b'di'evet it's asur. The chal and the meat. So these shita, the Rabia and the Or Zarua, are the stricter shitas concerning cooking the chal with other meat. That even b'di'evet, if it was done, they are concerned. Okay, they have the same concern, and they applied the gzera here too. That we would asur everything. It cannot be cooked with other meat, even if you prepare it. Prepare it by itself, maybe. But if that is for cooking purposes, we're talking about bishul only right now, not sli. Sli, as we said before, is less of a problem. But with cooking it with other meat, no. Even b'di'evet, it would be asur. Even if you cut it up properly. The Ran says that even the chatchil it's mutter to cook it with other meat in this particular fashion. That is, if you cut it up, no problem. The chatchil, go ahead and do so. That is the only way to do it. Cut it up and go ahead. Do it with other meat. According to Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam, it would also be mutter lechatchila to cook the kchal that was properly cut up. Properly cut up, we mean sheti ve'erev ve'ticho bekoisel with other meat.
And how does sheti like erev?
Once? Once this way, once this way. Yeah. Obviously, the more you cut, the better. Yeah. By cutting it up, you're enabling to take out whatever still may be there. Right. So cutting it up helps remove whatever still may be.
Then you have to
ticha b'koy, so they're pressing it, right? Anyway, so we have As far as the halacha of cooking it with other meat, we also have various shittas. Some actually allow it lechatchila, some don't allow it lechatchila. And then, of course, we have the din of b'di'evet, that if you did kriya, of course, then it would be mutter.
And then what would be mutter?
What? The kchal, if you even though you may not be able, according to some Rishonim, to cook it with other basar, but if you did it properly, it would be okay. That's the machlokes in Rashi, what Rashi would hold. It's a machlokes in Rashi, but apparently the consensus is that at least if you did it, you have less problems. We're going to see what the Ramah holds. Halacha l'maaseh, that only behefset beruba. We're going to see he's more machmir than the mechaber is when it comes to kchal, as far as the lechatchila din and a b'di'evet din in the various scenarios of bishul by itself, bishul with other meat, tzli by itself, tzli with other meat. And perhaps that's what we should do. I think we should, I'm going to go over with you these various scenarios, and then we'll read the mechaber in Sif Aleph, inside, and the Ramah. Because once we know the various scenarios, it helps us better understand what he's talking about. Okay, so now that we understand more or less what the chilukim are, what the issues are, what are the scenarios? All right, we have as follows. We have chilukim between tzli and bishul, whether it was done by themselves or whether it was done with other meat. Then we have a chiluk whether that which is cooked or roasted had been prepared with the kriya and the ticha b'koisel or not, whether it was partially done or all of it was done. And in all of these chilukim, there is a chiluk of lechatchila and b'di'evet, and by the way, a third chiluk of the minhag. So you see all the chilukim? Cooking versus roasting it, cooking, roasting by itself or with others, cooking or roasting by itself or with others, whether you prepared it right or did not prepare it right, and all of these scenarios in a lechatchila situation, in a b'di'evet situation, and what the minhag is today. That's why, as I said before, I think a table will help us see this a little bit better. All right, so let's go through each one. Let's start with tzliya. It's the easiest one, because that's the way I think most people would prepare it. Roasting it. Anyway. By the way, there are some people that after they've roasted something, they want to cook it. Different kind of recipe. Halachas about that. You can do that or not. Can you cook something which you were not supposed to cook, but you roasted it? And now you want to cook it. But since you roasted it, can you cook it? All right. All right, so roasting the kchal. By the way, maybe we should find out if we can somehow get a hold of a kchal. The Gemara says, Osid Odom Litin Tadin, one will give judgment upstairs for not having tasted all the fruits, all that there is to enjoy in this world. To make a bracha, to enjoy. So I guess if you don't enjoy it, then you don't have to have it. But, I heard that the FDA, or whoever is in charge of the health issues, does not allow certain internal organs to be sold. And I guess I would have to go to Mexico, maybe, or to some country. Or even in Israel, they sell all kinds of things that they don't sell here. But anyway, roasting the kchal by itself. That's din number one. What is the halacha? What we're going to find is that the mechaber is going to say that whoever wants to roast a kchal by itself, all he needs to do to be korea kriya mu'etet, even a little bit, cut up a little bit. You don't really need the full thing for tzli. Cut it up a little bit to take out whatever cholav is there. B'di'evet, if you didn't do it, it's mutter. The shit of the Ramah will be ligabet tzli, is the lechatchila, you have to do a real kriya. Even though this is tzli, there's such a thing as a partial kriya. You do the real kriya of sheti va'erev v'ticha b'koiso. B'di'evet, he also holds that the mechaber when it comes to tzli by itself, meat by itself, it's mutter. So tzli,
who's that now?
The Ramah. Even the Ramah agrees. So the only difference between the Mechaber and the Ramah apparently is tzli is in the lechatchila how much of a cutting up you have to do. Because you're going to do tzli anyway. It's by itself. What's the big deal? But the Ramah goes with the shittas that require the full-blown kriya. Some understand it to be that you need the whole thing in every area, in regardless of how you prepare the kchal. That's the way to prepare it, even though you're going to do tzli. But the Eved, he agrees with the Mechaber. All the Shitas agree that the Eved by tzli, there's no real problem. By itself, if the Basar is by itself. It becomes more complicated if it's with other meat.
Roasting now?
Roasting. We're going to soon see that. But before we go to other meat, let's talk about bishul by itself. Because we're trying to do it in this order. Tzli by itself, okay, Mechaber says, cut it up a little bit, roast it, gesundheit, as we say in Yiddish, enjoy it. The Ramah says, cut it up completely, not just partially like the Mechaber says. They both very much say, if you didn't do anything to it, you just roasted it by itself, it's mutter. Okay. What about cooking by itself? In the cooking scenario by itself, whoever wants to cook it, Mechaber, pretty much the Rambam, do not explicitly say you should do that. It's interesting. The Mechaber, if you read the Mechaber or the Rambam, basically, you don't find the halacha clearly as to can you or should you cook chal by itself. You see it about cooking with others. So the question is, what would the Mechaber say about cooking chal by itself? Is that a problem? And if you look at his language, even though he doesn't say so, it is inferred that he would say, okay, lechatchila, you want to cook it? Go ahead, and this time, cut it up properly. Not like by tzli. Cut it up properly, lechatchila, shet, tiva'ere, v'ticha, v'koiso, and b'di'evet, it's mutter. We're going to see it inside, and you're going to see that the Mechaber doesn't say that clearly, but it's understood that way from the other scenario. That if you wanted to do it lechatchila, the Mechaber doesn't have a problem with cooking it in the Sif Aleph. The Sif Beis tells us what the minhag is. But me'ikar adin, that's the way you would prepare it. You would cut it up properly, not just partially like in tzli. If you did not do it, he still holds its mutter b'di'evet. Yeah.
So if you didn't cut it up, it's mutter b'di'evet.
Yeah. Mechaber holds either way. You never cut it up.
But l'achila is supposed to cut it up.
Yeah, cut it up completely if it's cooking. If you're cooking it, cut it up completely. Why? Because you're going to be cooking it. Remember, there's a concern about the sheet that holds the milk coming out. So lechatchila, do it right. If you can do it right, why not? There's sheetas that are concerned about the milk coming out and in. If you didn't do it, Mechaber holds like the Rambam. Not a problem. It's not usher.
So what is then the difference by the Mechaber between and cooking alone?
Tzli, just partially cut it.
So it's just the degree you have to cut it l'atchila, and b'di'evet it will be either way.
Right. The cooking by itself will require much more effort, lechatchila, to take out whatever you have in there. To be concerned, we are concerned with the other shitas. The whole that it's usher. So therefore, cut it up properly. But the Eved, he holds like the Shitas who say, but the Eved, it's mutter. That's what the Gemara meant. The Gemara did not only mean by tzli, the Gemara meant even by bishul. That the chalav that's in the kachal is not going to ever present a problem with the Eved. Rashi learns that the Gemara is being matir in the tzli scenario. In bishul, no. Rashi is concerned because of the problem of milk coming out. So long as it didn't come out, it's okay. But once it came out, so if you're going to cook it, it's going to come out. But this is only midrabanan, remember. We're only talking about midrabanan here because everybody agrees that this is not a deraisa. So the question is, what did the Gemara really mean? It meant that it's tzli. Go ahead and do it tzli. But with bishul, it's not so clear that Gemara even allowed it to do it bishul. Lechatchilan, bedi eved. Rashi says, well, according to Rashi, if you cut it up completely, bedi eved, it's going to be okay. But if you didn't, it will be asar. Only if you cut it up properly, because that's what the Mishnah says you need to do. It's very unclear. That's why you have all these machlokim. It's very unclear as to how the Gemara holds in every one of these situations. So here we have that same machlokas Rishonim somewhat carry over to the Mechaber and the Ramah, whereas the Ramah is going more with the Chumrah, and the Mechaber is going with the Rambam, with the Shitas that are being more lenient with Chal. Yes, there's a din of L'chatchila, but there's a din of B'di'evet that we're not concerned.
How soon into the meat?
Well, we salt everything, right? We salt everything before. We want to remove any blood from all the organs.
So you're salting it after you move the milk?
Salting it before or after you do the
No, this is right before you roast it and cooking it. This is the last thing.
So the Kriya and the last
salting
thing,
has
salting
to do
it with the milk and salt.
Salting has to only do with the blood. Right? Veins have to be removed. Chalev has to be removed. Wherever parts of the animal has the chalev, because remember, you're cutting it up.
Yeah, I would finish.
That's the order. Yeah. No, you don't do the kriya right away. You put away the parts. The process, the way it works in the shlach house, in the slaughter, after the shchita, you do the bdika, right? You check the lungs if you have to, blow into it, and so forth. You check for the sirchas. That's the main examination. And then the animal is cut up. You rinse all the dam ba'in. You remove all the dam that is sitting there by just removing it. Then you soak. You want to remove the chaylev, right? You want to, what's called treber in the chaylev, in the veins. And then you want to soak the meat to soften it before you do the melicha. You need to soften the meat. It's still a little tough. And then you do the melicha. Now comes the next step. You want to cook it. You want to prepare it for consumption. Well, it all depends if it's liver. Because melicha for liver doesn't help. Even though the minhag is to put a little bit of salt when you roast the tzli. So the same thing with everything else. You've done the melicha, but now you want to go ahead and prepare it. So with the liver, you're going to have to roast it.
So that raises a question, because normally salting milk, mamish milk, would be a problem. And here we're not talking about real milk.
Right. It's not real milk.
So there's absolutely no problem at all in salt.
No, not that I recall. I don't recall any, The Melicha concerns here the dam only. And here we're still concerned with whatever is there that may be poirish through the process of cooking. So how do we get rid of that problem? So if you cut it up properly, you don't really have that problem. The question is, can you do that lechatchila? Can you cook it lechatchila? And some say no. Some say yes. By metzli, it's not a problem. You can eat it. Nobody tells you don't have the khal. Don't eat the khal. Just make sure you prepare it properly. And the best way to prepare khal is not to have it cooked with any other meat, for sure not. That presents a different set of problems. Do it by itself, and do it in sleep. So the question is, here is the b'di'evet. So what happens if you did not do it? So Mechaber says, okay, no problem. It's only lechatchila din, not the b'di'evet din. Ramah says, so the lechatchila, don't cook it by itself. Even if you cut it up, the Ramah is of the opinion that you shouldn't cook kachal. Even if you cut it up properly. B'di'evet, if you cut it up properly, it's mutter. If you did not cut it up properly, b'di'evet, it's also even behefsed meruba, according to the Ramah. So the Ramah says if you did not cut it up properly and you cooked it even by itself, it's also, forget it, it's lost. He's machmir. The Ramah is machmir if a person went ahead and cooked the kachal without properly preparing it. He holds that you shouldn't even do it, lechatchila. Cook it, don't cook it. But if you did, if you want to dafka, if you did it, nevertheless, if it was done, prepared right, then you're okay. If it was not, it's also even behefsed meruba. That was the second scenario. What about cooking kachal with other meat? And then we'll talk about roasting with other meat. Cooking with other meat, according to the Shulchan Aruch, no problem. Lechatchila, he never says there's a problem of lechatchila, of cooking it by itself or with others. It's not a problem. He says as long as you prepare it properly, kriya, the washeti va'erev v'tchiya bekoiso, then it's mutar lechatchila. Ramah says it's also to be mevashel kachal with other meat, even after kriya gemura. He's concerned about the shita of the Ravya and the Orzarua. What happens if you cooked it with other meat anyway? If you did it properly, then you cut it up, you sliced it up properly, then it's only mutar behefsed meruba. He does not allow it. He did not want people to just think, go, okay, it's okay, fine, but the evidence, it's okay, you cooked it with other. No, it's very, very serious. To cook it with other meat, you're transferring the tam into the other meat. That scenario is more complicated and more serious than the basar by it being cooked by itself. Whereas, as we said in the name of Rabbeinu Tam, it doesn't really change in its tam. Here, you're taking that tam of sorts and having it go into another basar, or having that chalav that absorbed other basar going back into the chal. There's the other way of looking at it. Either way, it's more complicated when you're cooking it with other meat, and that's what the Ramah says. No way, don't. Just like he was machmir not to cook chal at all, right? Kol sheken, you shouldn't cook it with other meat. But if you did, and it was properly done, then it's only mutar behefsed meruba. there's no need to say that if you didn't do it, cut it up properly, then everything is asr. Just like in the first case where you cooked it by itself and you didn't do it, it's asr. Even behefsed meruba, kol sheken here. If you didn't do it, everything is asr, not just a cow. But he would allow behefsed meruba if somebody, the cook, the chef, threw in a chal together with the other meat, but he had properly prepared it. He cut it up according to halacha. If it's a big hefsed, then it's mutter. What's the din of tzliya with other basar? Well, we said tzliya is the easiest one of all. Tzliya by itself is not a problem. It becomes more complicated when you're roasting with other meat. And in those days, many times the roasting process was done where one was on top of the other. It was not on one spit. Roasting was one on top of the other. Well, what happens when you roast something on top of the other? You have something dripping from the top one to the bottom. So roasting in itself is mentioned in the mechaber, but the scenario of roasting with other meat is not mentioned clearly. But we can infer what the mechaber would say about roasting with other meat too. It's understood that if he cut it up a little bit, like he says when you're roasting it by itself, that it would be mutter, no problem, even if the chal is sitting on top. Why on top? Because I would think, well, if it's on top, if it's on the bottom, I don't care, because the chal is not dripping on any meat. But if the chal is on top, I would say, well, maybe that I shouldn't do that. No, even if the chal is on top, the mechaber is not so concerned. If you cut it up a little bit, even with roasting with other meat, by the time it comes down, it's dripping, it's all being burnt up anyway. The very little that's coming down, we're not machmer. As it is, we don't have to be machmer with the evet. So he says you can lechatchila, that's the way we infer from the mechaber, you can lechatchila roast a chal, even if it's sitting on top of other meat. As long as you cut it up a little bit, you can do it lechatchila too. What happens if you did not do any kriya b'di'evet? So the Gro over here says that it's understood from the Shuchan Aruch that it's also mutter b'di'evet, even without any. In other words, since by bishul he's meiko, he's lenient, the more so by tzli, even though the kal is sitting on top, it's not a problem. Tzli is always going to be less of a problem than bishul is going to be. So the mechaber would allow it, roasting with other meat, lechatchila, cut it up a little bit. If you didn't b'di'evet, it's still okay, even if the kal is sitting on top. What about the Ramah? The Ramah, as we will see later on inside, is going to hold that lechatchila also do not roast chal together with other meat, even with kriya and ticha. He's opposed to doing chal with other meat, whether it's bishul or tzliya. B'di'evet, if you did it properly, if you cut it up properly, it's mutter even if the chal is on top. So here the Ramah gives in a little bit and says, I will be lenient when you roast meat. When you roast chal with other meat, if you properly prepare, even though I don't want it lechatchila, just like I don't want bishul with other basar, but in bishul I told you it's only mutter behefsed meruba if you cut it up properly. Here he doesn't say that you need hefsed meruba. By tzli, remember tzli is more lenient, even though he's lechatchila says I don't want you to do it with other meat. Even if you do it right, if you did it right, b'di'evet, you roasted it together, even if the chal is on top, it's going to be mutter, even if it's not a big hefsed. What happens if you did not cut it up? According to the Ramah, the one that's sitting on top is okay, not the one that's sitting on the bottom. So again, the Ramah is going more with the shitas that are concerned, and even if you did not cut it up properly, you got a problem here. But you only got a problem with the one that's in the bottom, not the one that's on top. So if the chal happens to be on top, the chal, of course, will be okay. In the cooking, everything is together, so they both may become aser. But in sli, if you have a situation where one is on top of the bottom, one is on top of the other, and you did not do any kriya, then the one at the bottom is going to be a problem. The one on top is going to be okay. If you did the kriya properly, then even the Ramah will grant you that it's okay, because it's sli.
Oh, the one underneath?
No, there's
or
no. Just achila. Yeah.
There's only by
Yeah, Isra Hano is only by the rice. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, they actually, that's discussed too, that the Isra Hano does not apply here, because it's not a deraisa, right? Just to finish up, in Sif Beis we will see that the minhag, the Machar brings down, is not to cook the kachal at all with other meat, just like the Ramah would say, but to just cook it by itself. And if you cook it by itself, of course, it would need kriya thoroughly. And the Ramah is going to say that the minig is not to cook it at all, but to do tzli. And as far as tzli, the minig will be, according to the mechaber, to make a little bit of a kriya, partial kriya. We don't need to squeeze out or press it completely. And the Ramah is going to tell us that even with tzli, the minig is, when you do it by itself, that you do the properly thorough cutting up. These are basically the shitas, and I'm just going to read it inside. So Sif Aleph, Akhal, Pirush Adat Shel Behema, the other, also Medivre Soifrim. It's also Midrabanon. Why? What's the problem with it? She'ein Basar Shenizbashel B'cholav Shchuto also Minatorah. It's not Minatorah, it's not also any meat that was cooked B'cholav Shchuta. Lefichach, therefore, Im Koroi, if you did cut it up, Melicha Chalav Shabbat, and you removed whatever little milk is there, Mutar Litzloiso V'lo Yichlo, you can actually go ahead now and roast it and eat it. If you really cut it up all the way and you squeezed out everything, until there's no lachluchis. What's the word in English, lachluchis? Moisture of any chalav. Then mutar levashloi meikar adin. You can even cook it im habasar, with other meat. Vekachal shelo koroi, if you did not cut it up. Ben shel ktano shelo inika, ben shel gdoilo, whether it's from a young calf that did not nurse. Ben shel gedola from an older cow, it's also levashloi. If you did not cut it up, you shouldn't cook it. But im avar ubishloi b'fnei atzmo, if you did not cut it up and you cooked it by itself, and of course, if you roast it, mutar le'ochloi, you're allowed to still eat it. That's me'ikar adin the mechaber says. Yes, go ahead and cut it up. If you didn't, it's mutar. V'im bishloi im basar acher, and if you cooked it up with other meat, and you didn't cut it up, misharin oisu b'shishim, you're going to have to now calculate shishim. In other words, if you didn't do it right, now we're talking about it, you complicated the situation. You didn't cut it up, you cooked it with other meat, now you have a problem, even according to the Mechaber. Sli is not a problem, but bishul, even according to Mechaber, is a problem if you cook it with other meat and you didn't do it properly. So if you didn't do it, you didn't cut it up, you're going to have to resort to shishim. However, kchal min haminyan, the kchal will be considered part of the shishim. Ketzad, how? If everything together with the kchal was about 60, bakchal against the kchal, a kchal osur, the kchal will be osur, v'ashar mutar, the rest will be mutar. B'pochus mishishim, there's less than shishim, a kol osur, everything is osur. Now the Mechaber will go into another din, and I'm just going to read it, but we'll explain it next time we get together. Beinkach uveinkach, regardless of what happened. In other words, if there was shishim, no shishim, im nofalek deira acheres, if this same chal, even if there was shishim, okay, it just makes no difference how. But if this same chal, nofalek deira acheres, oiser oiso, it will continue to aser. We may think not, and again we will explain this point next time, because we've covered it in Hilchos Taaruvot of a piece of iser, right, being able to aser one more time. So this kachal, even though you may think, well, it released everything it had the first time, we don't know that for sure. There's still left over, right? It will also complicate that. Remember, this is a kachal that was not cut up. You have to go ahead and calculate again 60 like the first time. The fact that the kchal was cooked in the improper way, it becomes a chaticha asura. And therefore, it continues to aser. However, here there's going to be a difference between the Mechaber and the Ramah. The Mechaber is going to say, I still give you a chance to figure the next time around 59 like I did the first time around.
Although he calls it chaticha asura.
Yeah, chaticha asura, just that it asers later on again. And you have to figure according to the size it appears now, not necessarily according to the size it was before it fell, before it was cooked, which may have been smaller or bigger. You always go by the time it is now, presently, you see it right now. This is also something that we discussed back then, that sometimes an Issa changes in size. It shrinks. It may shrink. But what do you go by? Well, it depends if you know what the size was. Sometimes you don't know how big it was when it fell in. You just see it the way it is right now. So that's what the Mechaber is saying. You go and you judge by what it appears to you right now. The Ramah says, if it did in fact fall into a Gdera that there was no Shishim, the first time around, the Chal was Nesa, if it falls into another pot, there we don't allow the Chal to be part of the Shishim. The Chen Ikar, according to the Ramah, this is the one of the machlokes between the Ramah and the Mechaber in this last details that we will discuss next time as to whether you allow the Chal to be part of the Shishim the second time around. The first time around, everybody's Meiko. Chal is not your typical Isser. It's not even your typical Isser the Rabbanan. We're going to see the various shitas as to why Chal is allowed to be included in the 60. There's various explanations for it. Why Chal is unique, that we can include it in the Shim. But nevertheless, we still have a machlokes as to what happens if that Chal falls again. Can we still allow it to? The halachas of Hanan don't exactly apply to it, as we will see. Even though it's the Rabbanan, it's not your typical the Rabbanan, that we're so concerned that, we remember the cloud. We don't make Zera like Zera here. We never make a Zera for a Zera.
Quick question, did you actually explain why the Chal becomes forbidden? The rest of if we don't have 60, the rest of the meat is mut, is that what we said?
No, we say everything.
If we do have 60.
If you do have 60.
The Chal asur, the Shal mutar.
Right.
Why, do we say why the Chal is asur and the Shal is mutar?
The Chal was not proper. Remember, we're talking about a situation which was not properly cut up. So it has absorbed, because of the Pirish, what came out and went back in is what makes the Chal also right now.
But if it was alone without the other, it would be mutar. But yet,
right, exactly. Yeah. So
but if there's other meat around,
right, we explained it briefly. You were maybe in a different world at that. No. We will. Well, thank you for raising it, but we will explain it a little bit more in detail later on. It has to do with the fact that it's traveling into other meat. Right. You're right. Moinitz by itself, at least according to the Mechaber, it's not going to present a problem even b'di'evet. Right? You have to cut it up. The problem is with other meat. Whereas this milk, or whatever is there, is traveling into other meat and becoming, in a sense, usser, and now coming back into the Chal. It's not the Chal in itself, its own milk coming to itself, but going into other meat. So, very good point. Yeah, but we'll leave that for next time, Mr. Hashem. Remind me in case I don't, as to what exactly happens when it's being cooked with other meat, which is really part of the problem and why the minhag is, don't cook it with other meat.
No, because right.